Hey, Steve. How you
Good
doing?
morning. Good morning, David. I am doing outstanding. How are you, sir?
I am doing pretty good. I mean, it's Monday morning. Summer's gone now, so back to normal life.
Yes, yes.
However, I am
However,
delighted because our guest is one of the most dapper dresser of the entire CAI world. He actually beats you every time, I would say.
oh, now I'm excited myself. It is Monday morning, and you know what? Our very, very special guest is somebody I've known for a number of years, since the early starts of my career in this industry. And so today, Mr. David, we have to speak with, bring him on, drum roll, please. All right. It is Mr. Brian Weaver, and he is the vice president over at Wilkin Management Group. Brian, thanks for being on the show. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what Wilkin Management does?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I'll tell you a little bit about my personal side first. I'm married to my high school sweetheart. We have 5 children. My 3 daughters are all married. I got 2 boys. One's at the Naval Academy and one is looking to be a naval officer. On the business side, I've been with Wilkin Management for 15 years. We've been in the business for about 40 years of managing communities as well as doing light construction for those communities.
Wow, no kidding.
So I don't know what I'm more impressed with, like the curriculum of your kids or the fact that you're married to your high school sweetheart, because in today's day and age, it's not, it's not very common. So congratulations on all of the above.
Thank you. A lot of hard work. My hat's off to my wife.
So now going back to business, so you're on the property management side. So over the past 15 years and 40 years, when you accumulate everybody with the company, like budget season, which we're in the midst of, it's always like the most fun time of the year for property manager. Just kidding. It's probably the busiest, difficult season. How is this year more difficult maybe than years past?
Well, as a company, we have that budget process pretty locked down. We've taken a lot of the heavy lift away from the managers, so they're not running that whole process A to Z. For the most part, we take care of that for them, and it's really not an issue. The biggest issue is the rise in costs and insurance this year. That's going to be a big conversation. My real concern, though, is the next 2 years, because if laws are passed that are going to mandate reserve funding, that is going to be a serious conversation with boards, because reserve contributions could be 25% of a budget,
Yep, absolutely. The rising cost of insurance is a thing right now. We've been watching it happen for some time, and now we are smack dab in the middle of the hardest market that anybody has ever seen. It hasn't been this bad since the 20s. But insurance aside, what are some of the mistakes, some of the pitfalls that managers might be able to actually avoid while setting these budgets? What do you have any advice for that?
I do. The biggest mistake I see that boards and managers do is they back into the budget. So we'll hear all the time, happened actually yesterday. A board says, we don't want to raise dues this year, or we only want to raise dues by 3%. Unfortunately, when you do that, all your contracts are your contracts. So the 2 line items that end up getting trimmed are reserve contributions and your maintenance budget. And those are the 2, in my opinion, 2 of the most important line items. So it's a big mistake. Don't do it. Strongly encourage boards and managers. Your expenses are what your expenses are. Plan accordingly.
Okay, so I know one of the tools that they can use is a reserve study. How do you feel about reserve studies? How important is that for impacting your budget?
Extremely important. A current reserve study, I should say, because many boards, unfortunately, will do a reserve study and then boards and managers shelve it for 5-6 years, and it's not doing you any good. With a current reserve study, you have current numbers in terms of construction costs, your deterioration of your components, as well as your reserve balances. All 3 of those factors are extremely important in putting the right line item, right budget number for your reserve contributions.
In your expert opinion, Brian, what is the best way for budgeting for reserve projects?
Sure. I like a 3-part approach to that. The first is make sure you're funding your reserves according to the reserve study, an updated reserve study. Number 2, as you get closer to that reserve project, you want to have an engineer do what's called a program development report or a feasibility study. That's going to give you a real number in terms of that project. Once I have that and I sit down with the board and I add in any other soft costs, then step 3 would be create specs and go out to bid. But I don't want to do that third part until we have a good idea and of the numbers and a buy-in from the board on the magnitude of the project.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It really does. Now, is it important for an association to be financially sound? I know when we're selling an association as a risk to insurance companies, they want to see the financials. But from your guys' perspective, how important is it for any association to actually be financially sound and solid?
I believe it is the most important responsibility of a board member. I mean, by far. If you have an association that is not well funded, it is city traffic. You, as a manager, are going out to bid for small items, boards not making decisions on certain items because they don't have the money, vendors are calling for payment, owners are angry because work's not getting done. So, if you have an association that's financially sound, things run like clockwork, as they should.
Yeah, and if you start taking away the money from like those projects, ultimately you're gonna have deteriorating buildings, you're gonna have more losses, which in turns equals higher premium in insurance, and that doesn't help anything to get better. So definitely like your approach there and the philosophy you have behind it. Now, what do you do if you have to do this roof repair or you have to do this major project, but you just don't have the money for it?
There are 3 options or a variation of any one of the 3, and I'll go through them in terms of cost to the homeowner. The first is assess. That's going to be the least expensive, but it's the most painful to the owners because generally you need that assessment up front. The second is a loan. It's going to be more expensive because you have all the costs associated with the loan, but you can get the project done right away and spread the payments over a period of time. The third is to defer the project or phase the project. Unfortunately, that is the most expensive route because your components deteriorate exponentially. So your costs are just going to continue to increase.
So those are in the current context, because money is not cheap right now. It doesn't seem like there's any like really, really good option. So how can you address your funding issues and maybe even solve them?
Sure. For me, the most important thing is having a board member who understands the financials. So if you have a treasurer or somebody on the board who understands the financials, it's no longer management versus the board. You actually have somebody who understands where you're really at, and they're your advocate. So I think that's extremely important. Number 2 is you want to have at least 3 months of operating cash at all times, and 3, fund that reserve account according to the reserve study. Just really do yourself a favor. If you do those 3 things, you're on your way to being financially sound.
Okay. So can you provide us and our viewers with an example maybe of specifically how you've been able to get an association back on the right path? Because it's not something that can happen overnight. So what are some of the techniques?
Well, I'll start by saying that's the most rewarding part of what I do. I love this. I love working with boards on major CapEx projects, especially when a board has no idea how to go about doing this. Just in the last year alone, there's 2 examples I can think of. We took over an association that had over $5 million of projects, and the prior management company didn't have the, ability to be able to put together the funding or structure all those projects. So in the process of us taking over, sat down with the whole board, laid out a plan, went back to a bank with a strategic plan for tackling the projects, got them the $5 million, and we're probably 90% done with that project and trending under budget. So that's extremely rewarding to me.
Kudos to you guys for being able to do that. It's tough to navigate. There's emotions involved, but man, that's really nice that you guys can actually come in and make a difference for the community. These are people's homes, this is where they live. Sometimes they can't wrap their brains around the fact that sometimes the fees are going to have to go up to improve their lifestyle. Brian, thank you so much for sharing with us. Now, on this show, we do like to give our guests an opportunity to recognize somebody who's been influential in their career or just in their life and the path that they're on now. Is there somebody that you'd like to mention or somebody you'd like to recognize for our audience?
Sure. There's a couple people. I'm going to start with the first, which to me is not in our industry. His name is Dave Ramsey, not the attorney Dave Ramsey. He's a author, speaker, speaks on personal finance and running small business. He's practical, to the point, love his approach to business, very influential in my life. The second is the two of you guys, and I don't say that lightly. I say it because last year I was watching you guys do this car chat, and I said to myself, you know what? This is going to be the launch of my own LinkedIn and what I'm doing and want to share to the community association world and our CAI world. So you guys were very influential in me launching that on my end. So thank you.
Bro. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very, very thoughtful.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, usually we clap, but we're going to clap for Dave Ramsey, and I'll clap for you, Steve. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Brian. And
You are welcome.
you can find Brian on LinkedIn. Reach out to him, direct message him. If you like the message you hear, contact him. And if you have questions or would like us to address a specific topic on the show, let us know directly using our direct message through LinkedIn as well. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Brian, we'll see you at the next CI event.
See you guys.
You got it. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.